color correction, basic correction, and creative. Lumetri Color is good because it combines all the tools that exist and that all are similar to it in Premiere and decomposes them all into blocks. Here we have these blocks: basic correction, creative, curves, color wheels and match, HSL secondary and vignette. They are arranged according to the application sequence. Let's start with the first block. It's basic correction. Now I will display two of our main assistants on the Lumetri Scopes panel: waveform RGB and vector scope YUV. Firstly, we consider the input LUT. If we look, there will be different LUT. Look up table. For different cameras, LUT is a preset that allows us to correctly deploy the color that is on the camera. When we get a picture from a professional camera, the color may be covered by some profile. We see a gray image. Its information is located on the waveform RGB, somewhere in the middle. The picture is pale and low contrast. It needs to be properly deployed with a correct LUT, with a correct profile. If we choose a random setting of the LUT, it can be very interesting, and we will want to start with this color correction. Perhaps, but in fact this setting exists for different purposes. Although they look like presets looks, but look and LUT are different things. We'll consider look further, where the drop-down menu is basically similar. We select the LUT in the first block. Now it's too early to look at it, so let's leave it out. Next, we have the white balance selector. This is the kind of thing that allows us to quickly align the white balance. It's available in other effects, such as fast color corrector. It was added to this panel relatively recently. This is strange because it appeared in fast color corrector a very long time ago. How does it work? We use the pipette to select everything on the frame that we consider white in order to balance the whole picture relative to this. Here we have a picture with an obvious yellow color, and it turns yellow. So we can click on white and get a balanced picture with the white color that should be there. We don't have to click on white, we need to click on something that doesn't contain color information. White, gray. It's better not to click on the black color, because it will be problematic to balance it. Let's look at this video. There are clearly problems with the white balance, so we take a pipette, click on the sneakers and get the desired result. Moreover, it contains open information, the sliders of which can be seen below. It automatically builds the temperature and tint parameters. We can edit these parameters manually at our discretion. We can manually determine the white balance and the hue. Then we have exposure. In general, the exposure makes the image darker or lighter. Let's say we want to make this image darker, so we lower the exposure. While we're lowering it, the entire RGB waveform graph is lowering too. That is not the best option in this case. In general, it's very good to show on a line like this. We can completely reduce the exposure, and our shadow is lowered accordingly. At the same time, the black color remains in place, and we go to the plus. You'll see that the curve doesn't go up, but bends. The graph works with black and white slightly differently. When we lower the contrast parameter, the pixels from the edges will move to the center. When we increase the contrast, the pixels will be smeared at the edges. When we make the image more contrasting, the graph will show that the pixels are more polarized between the edges. The more they spread around the edges, the more contrasting picture is, and vice versa. The closer they are to the middle, the more natural the picture is. This is how the contrast works. We need to double-click on any place in the line in order to reset any parameter to 0. You don't have to just click on the center. Let's consider highlights, shadows and midtones. Highlights occupy the top third of the graph, midtones occupy the middle, and shadows occupy the bottom third. When we move the highlight slider, we can see that the upper part of the graph is more activated. However, the lower one is considered linked. When we move the shadows, the lower part of the chart will move and the upper part will be fixed. Let's look here. When you increase the highlights, the upper half of the curve will bend more. The lower half will try to be fixed. The shadows give the same effect in the lower part. The whites and blacks graph looks like this. You see, the clamp signal checkbox is not enabled, so it shows how we move the curve beyond 100. So it bends. By the way, this is the only way that allows us to try to return the information that went above 100. For example, the cloud texture can have a value above 100, but we can lower the whites. We won't be able to do the same with exposure, because it won't go through this top, where the information remains. Whites is the only parameter that can operate beyond 100. Blacks is the same thing. We lower or increase the black color, the rest of the line is more or less fixed. We press reset to return all of our sliders to their original position. We have a mode like auto, where it usually does what it thinks is right. In this case, it will mostly like pull the graph down, and something like that. No, it didn't even completely lower it, but made the picture a little darker. And here too, for some reason it thinks it should be darker, but this is its taste. I don't always agree with it. More precisely, I always disagree, so I never use auto mode. And the last slider that is here is saturation. We raise it or lower it. The image becomes more saturated, or vice versa. There is also a small secret here. If we raise the slider to plus, then it will raise to 200, and if we need to increase the saturation even more, we can set the value to 300 and get an even greater value. 300 is the maximum for this slider. The next box we will look at is creative. There is a little more space for imagination, because the look parameter is here. We can click and choose wherever we like this or that effect or not. It's completely inconvenient to use mouse buttons, so we can scroll through the drop-down menus using the mouse wheel. You won't be able to scroll from the very beginning, because the value is none. Then, if you try to scroll, you'll get to browse where it searches looks on the computer. They can also be downloaded from different places and installed in the program in this way. There are a huge number of them. The next option to view the effects is here on the screen, using the left and right arrows. You can review the options without applying them to the video itself. Basically, there are various darkroom processes and cross processes as well. A cross process is a process where a film claimed by one process is developed by another process. For example, codec film is developed according to the Fuji algorithm, where different color solutions are developed. Digital color correction appeared later, so people stopped doing it, but it remained as an effect. Let's say we found something we like. We click right here, the preset is applied. For example, this is looks, but there is one problem with them, because it's a closed thing, a black box. We can't see how this or that process occurred. Trying to reproduce it yourself is almost impossible. If you are given a colored video and asked to reproduce the same effect, then nothing can be understood, because there are no settings for these presets, except for one. There is only one setting, intensity. If we like the effect, but not so saturated, we can use this slider to lower the intensity. And if there is no enough intensity, we can bring the slider to plus. The result is unpredictable. Usually, we can do the following. For simplification, we align the image with devices, and by eye, without adding artistic elements, we make the correct white balance, etc., so that the frames are similar to each other. Then we put the adjustment layer on top, and then put all the creative presets on it. We do it in order not to repaint each frame in the look, but simply change it to the adjustment layer. So, we close it. As I said, this is a good thing, but at the final stage, when you have all the frames aligned in color, then you can do the artistic component of the video. Next, we have the faded film parameter. Let's pay attention to the graph. It creates the effect of an old film. It's always non-contrasting. All pixels on waveform RGB are in the middle. There is no black and white. the graph is compressed in the central part. Sharpen is a good thing that does the following. It makes the picture sharper by increasing the local contrast. See, if we raise sharpen to the maximum, we'll get this result. Here is a picture with sharpen and in the second frame without it. So everything immediately becomes sharper. All the wrinkles, the hair, etc. are drawn. It increases the perception of a video, but no new information appears in the video. It's the local contrast that appears where there is some color difference. As soon as it appears, we'll push the pixels together a little, so the details become sharper. Of course, this effect can't save the video if it's shot without focus, but it's impossible to sharpen the facial features. This effect doesn't look very good on a female portrait. Vibrance and saturation do almost the same thing, but with a small difference. Both of these parameters increase the saturation of a frame. If we look at the rotoscope YUV with increasing vibrance, our cloud will spread evenly. The saturation of every pixel approaches one specific denominator. When we increase saturation, our cloud would stretch proportionally, in which direction the pixels are. Then, in the same direction, they will stretch, but further from the center. No additional cloud will appear as in vibrance. Therefore, this can be done differently for different tasks. Reducing the vibrance to zero gives a different effect compared to saturation, because here the color still remains, but it's much less. Perhaps this effect will be suitable for your tasks. Why do we have it here? We have it because our editing systems and photo editors have such a thing as vibrance, so it's also in Premiere. Next, we have shadow tint and highlight tint. We can paint shadows and bright and dark places in different directions, and vice versa. For example, the picture suits us, but the shadows are too cold, so we need to make them warmer, but most often it's used to move the highlights and shadows in different directions. Let's say that warm highlights and cold shadows added internal contrast. Let's make shadow tint cold and highlight tint warm. It turned out to be a bit of cinematic look that we're used to. We won't say that this is something cool, but we're used to the fact that films are painted in this way. And the last slider is tint balance, that changes the border between shadows and highlights. If we increase it, then the influence of this graph will be greater. If we move in here, we will have more influence from this graph. By default, this balance is in the middle. Shadows are here, highlights are here. They act differently and spread in different directions. For now, we are done here.